Good evening, everybody. We're going to get started in just a second. If people could take their seats. For those of you that are sort of by the entryway, you could sort of maybe snake around the room just a little bit for us, please, just so we have a happy fire marshal person. If you could just sort of move along the back wall just a little bit so the exits are clear, that'd be great.
Let's get out of here. Go straight back.
Okay, we're going to ask you to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and the National Anthem.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, guys, we're going to start to sing. All right. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight for the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave for the land of the free and the home of the brave. See you Monday. Don't forget to do your homework. We don't have homework. We don't have homework. Make sure you read. It's hard.
Sorry. Good evening.
Hello.
Hi. Welcome, members of the community, parents, teachers, Assemblyman Lopez, Senator Seward. I'm Dawn Townsend. I teach at Cobleskill Richmondville, and I'm the president of the Cobleskill Richmondville Teachers Association. I just want to start by thanking everybody for coming out tonight to support and show respect for public education. We're here tonight because we want to make our voices heard and send a clear, powerful message to Governor Cuomo that our public schools are not for sale and that they are not for making a profit. I'm honored to introduce Assemblyman Lopez and Senator Seward, who've come to listen to us tonight, a skill that the governor apparently lacks, and bring our message back to Albany, where they've been working very hard to help us fight for what Schoharie County needs. I hope that many of you were able to visit our Take Action Center in the back of the room. If not, you might want to do it before you leave tonight. We'll keep the computers running. People back there to help you. It's easier than it sounds. Tonight's program will begin with a short presentation, and it will include remarks from several people who are the true experts in education and knowing what our students need to be successful. We'll hear from teachers throughout the county who know how to teach students. administrators who know how to run a school, parents who know what they want for their children's future, and last but not least, we'll hear from students themselves who know what is important to them. Afterward, we'll hear comments and reactions from Assemblyman Lopez and Senator Seward, and they will be able to answer some questions. Before we get started, I would just like to thank the Senator and the Assemblyman for taking the time out of their extremely busy schedules to be with us tonight. I'd like to thank the Best Western for giving us this room tonight at no cost, because they understand that the role strong schools have in building strong communities. Thank you, Larry, wherever you are. Thank you, Larry. I want to thank John Stiles from True American Designs for making those awesome banners for us in the back, and for meeting me at 8 a.m. on a Sunday morning when he was closed. Apparently it takes several days to make banners. Who knew? And I'd like to thank my second grade students, some of them are still here, for leading us in the pledge, and their parents for bringing them here tonight. I want to thank our musicians, Angela Lawrence and Owen Need, as well as our singer for the national anthem, and thank you for helping my students, Lara Grolick. So we're going to start the program now with a quick presentation. I want to introduce Terry Burton. He is a graduate of Schoharie Central School. He is a lifelong resident. He has been teaching 21 years at Middleburg Central School, and he serves on the Board of Education at Schoharie Central School for the past 5 years. He has 2 children in school, and he is here to give us some information about what's going on and how we can fight this fight.
Thank you, Dawn, and thank you for organizing this event. Welcome. Good evening. My name is Terry Burton. I'm a lifelong resident of Schoharie County, with the exception of 5 years I spent at a 4-year college. Wasn't a joke. I do have 2 kids in our public schools. I graduated SCS in 1986. I worked at Middleburg Central School District for 21 years, and I've been on the Board of Education for 4+ years. And I do that because I love our public schools. We have phenomenal public schools in Schoharie County, and we're all here because we feel the same way. And we have concerns currently about 2 main things, one of which is the financial chokehold that's put on us by the gap elimination adjustment, and the other is the educational reforms that Governor Cuomo has tied to some money that he's willing to offer. Oh, sorry. There we go. I'll talk briefly about the financial situation, but I know we have superintendents who will be speaking about that in more detail. Essentially, the GA has cost New York school districts over $9 billion. The cost of Schoharie County schools is over $25 million. I think Bruce had said $28 million or closer to that. Cuomo has suggested a state aid increase of $1.1 billion, but that's only if it's tied to educational reforms. And I know that state ed is advising twice that amount. In the last few days, I understand the Assembly has proposed $1.8 billion, which is excellent. Thank you very much. And I believe the Senate is $1.9 billion. Thank you very much. I know we have other people who will be speaking more about that. I really want to focus on some of the educational reforms that are being proposed by, I keep hitting the wrong button here, by Cuomo. There are lots of reforms, some of them that concern me as a teacher, as a parent, and as a board member, include merit pay for highly effective teachers, 50% of APPR based on test scores up from 20%, external and internal evaluation of educators, charter school cap eliminations, and a receivership model. If you're not aware, merit pay, Governor Cuomo is suggesting $20,000 in merit pay for highly effective teachers. This despite the fact that research shows it doesn't work, the teachers have not asked for it, we don't want it, and not all teachers are eligible. It's only for teachers who have a state test score. The other thing this does is foster competition that inhibits sharing of best practices. And I'm going to share some information now. It may make some teachers here feel a little uncomfortable because you probably know this to be true and it's something that you don't like to talk about. For parents, you're probably not aware. The state tests, currently our gross scores are based on state tests, and those are norm reference, which means my gross score is based on how my students perform compared to other similar students across New York State. Essentially, that means my score will be higher if other teachers of similar students do a bad job. Additionally, my score will be higher if I teach 5th grade. If the 4th grade teachers undertaught or taught under the potential of the students that I have this year. That is not the way we should be looking at these policies. We should not be looking at them and hoping that there are other teachers who are doing a poor job so that I look better. That is the wrong way to go about evaluating teachers and scoring. If you want to consider the merit pay model, it would work great for NFL owners who are incentivizing their coaches to get to the playoffs and win a Super Bowl. But I don't expect that Bill Belichick would be sharing his playbook at the end of the season. Consequently, or in a similar fashion, if teachers are going to be incentivized to do well, they won't be expected to share their best practices with other teachers if it's going to cause their score to go down. It's a bad policy. On tests, Governor Cuomo is requiring test scores comprised 50% of a teacher's APPR. This despite parents' concerns of over-testing. He's still considering doubling down on them. Scores cannot be verified by teachers. I have no clue how I get my scores. It's a mystery to me. They arrive, I get them, and I say, oh, great. That's what it is. We have concerns about test appropriateness. We've seen lots of evidence of the readability of tests and whether it's appropriate for those children. In addition, Governor Cuomo is requiring tenure, requires 5 consecutive years of effective test gross scores. And I want to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to share some personal data. The 2 bars that you see, the yellow bar and the blue bar, the yellow bar is the ELA scores for Middleburg Central School where I teach, and this is only 5th grade for 2008 and 2009, and the blue bar is math, and I teach math there. So in 2008 and 2009, my students, 90%, 92% approximately, were passing. They were doing a good job on New York State tests. So I thought I was doing well. In 2010, we scored the tests, and the raw scores were similar. I was happy because, once again, 90% of my students were proficient on the raw scores. And then the tests came out, or the scores came out, and this is what the data looked like for 2010, 2011, 2012. Despite the fact that my students had performed the same as they had the 2 years previous, and prior to 2008, I only went back to 2008. Despite that, 60% of my students were now passing. So they changed the cut scores so that fewer students were passing these tests. It was unexpected to me, and I'm sure it was unexpected to parents as well. In 2013 and 14 is when the Common Core tests were administered, and now you can see my test scores. So could I be effective on test gross scores for 5 years in a row? I have no clue. I don't know, because these scores are a mystery to me, and they're probably a mystery to you as well. Right. Wasn't me. I didn't move that bar. Someone did. The next question is about the evaluation. We're talking now about teachers are evaluated internally by their principals, and the APPR process has become pretty extensive. Principals are feeling overwhelmed with the amount of time that they're spending now evaluating teachers. And now Governor Cuomo is proposing that not only do we do internal evaluations, but they have to be done externally as well. That means somebody else must come in and evaluate the teachers. And first, that takes away local control. So local control is removed at that point. And second, who is going to do that? Who is going to come in and conduct those external evaluations? And who's going to pay for those external evaluations? And I suggest that that's an unfunded mandate, and we're going to be paying for that. And I suggest that if that passes, we're probably going to see these cropping up of evaluation agencies that hire people out to do this job at $100 an hour, and I don't feel like paying for that, and I'm sure you don't either. On charter schools. Cuomo's proposing raising the cap statewide from 560 to, 560 from 460. Currently, I believe there's 268 approved charters statewide. That will be 270 because Brighter Choice has just proven to be failing and 2 of their schools have closed. So there are more open, 266. I teach math. You guys edit that out, please. So that leaves us with 200 open charters. We have 200 open charters. I don't know why we need to raise the cap on charter schools. Really what we need is accountability, transparency, and anti-creaming legislation. If you really, did anybody see the news, watch the news last week and see 13,000 red-shirted, red-capped kids on the state capitol with Ashanti performing a concert, 500 charter buses from New York City. This is a $500,000 civic field trip, $500,000 field trip to come to Albany and ask for more money and more schools to be open. $500,000. We have kids that are in schools right here in this room, represented by teachers in this room, who haven't been on a field trip this year. So the audacity of that field trip. If you really want to know what's driving that charter school initiative, there are 3 articles right over there underneath the Call Out Cuomo poster. There's a blue and a yellow and a white one. If you really want to understand it, and I didn't understand it either, I didn't understand why Families for Excellent Schools paid for this trip, $500,000 or whatever it was, and why 4 hedge fund managers sit on that 5-member board, and why I did not understand that connection until I read the article, particularly the blue one over there, the gravy train. If you really want to understand it, you would read that article. And if you want to invest, perhaps you want to invest in charter schools, because apparently there's a 39% tax credit and you can double your money in 7 years, which is why lifting that cap will open up those floodgates for financing that. So I would suggest you grab those articles, 10-minute read, and you'll understand it perfectly, and you'll be infuriated like I was. The last thing is proposed is that, looking at a receivership model, and this is taking over failing schools, or what he deems to be failing schools, but of course we look at the test results there, and what's failing and what isn't, we don't know. He's suggesting the receivership model. The model is based on Lawrence, Massachusetts, a public school serving 14,000 students in 23 schools. Buffalo would likely be the first target of that. Buffalo serves 34,000 students in 60 schools. But the question is, what would a community look like without a public school structure? And that's a really big question. And I was thinking about that when we talked about charter schools. I think the legal busing limit in our area is about 15 miles, or state is 50 miles. That is, you can bus a kid 15 miles from your district to another school. And I thought, what would be the ground zero here in Schoharie County to suck money out of our public schools? And actually, I don't want to put you on the spot, Pete, but your office is ground zero, right where you are across from Dunkin' Donuts. If I were to start a charter school there, I could draw kids from DeWaynesburg, Burn Knox, Middleburg, Schoharie, and Cobleskill. And my question is, what would our school districts look like if that happened? That would be frightening. The last thing is, what's missing in all this? If Cuomo really considers himself to be the true voice for children, why is the one thing that's most important really at the bottom of his agenda? And that is teacher preparation and teacher training. If he really cares about those students and wants them to have the best teacher possible, shouldn't that be at the top of his agenda and not at the bottom? Which leads us to ask this question: is this really about helping children? I hope you have an opportunity to grab those articles, read it, get informed about what charter schools really do to our communities, and I think you'll understand, and I think you'll be angry. Thanks again.
Thank you, Terry. Before I introduce the next speaker, if anybody's on social media, uses social media, if you want to comment on anything you see or hear tonight, or you want to share any of the information that you learned tonight, hashtag #AllKidsNeed, hashtag #CallOutCuomo, hashtag Cobleskill Education Forum. And that would be a great way to spread the word and help make your voice heard. Next, I want to introduce Bruce Tryon. This is Bruce's 7th year on the Board of Education at Cobleskill Richmondville, his 5th year as our president. He is a current and past vice president and president of the Schoharie County School Board Association. His wife Carol is an educator in Oneonta, in the Oneonta City Schools. And he has 2 daughters that graduated from Cobleskill Richmondville Central School. Bruce Tryon.
Wow, this is unbelievable. I'm so proud of this community for the turnout that you all came tonight. We live in a great community, don't we? For sure. Well, good evening and nice job, Terry. My name is Bruce Tryon, and yes, I am the president of the Board of Education here at Cobleskill Richmondville Central School. Before I begin, I personally want to thank Dawn Townsend for taking the initiative and putting this program together. We're very proud of you, Dawn. Great job. I was going to ask you to stand, but you're already standing. So. Now, why is the president of the local school board speaking at a union forum? Some people may ask. Well, let me tell you why. It is because we walked together, joined at the hip, against what the good governor of New York State, I guess you could call him good governor, is doing to public education. It is a travesty. And all who care about educating our students to their fullest potential need to rise up and push back against the bully tactics that are being employed by Governor Cuomo. As I have said publicly for over a month now, Governor Cuomo is essentially, he's holding every student in New York State hostage by linking the release of our state aid runs only if his proposed education reform package is adopted, which, by the way, contains many mandates and offers an amount of funding that is woefully inadequate to cover existing programs. School boards across the state, including ours here, are attempting to introduce our 2015-16 operating budgets without knowing the funding that we should expect from Albany. Essentially, we have one arm tied behind our backs, and we're using way too many assumptions in the budget development process. Just a little history here at Cobleskill Richmondville. Here at CRCS, our students have suffered the consequences of the Gap Elimination Adjustment, or GEA. The Gap Elimination Adjustment was implemented by New York lawmakers during the 2010-11 fiscal year to help close the state's $10 billion budget deficit at that time. Under the legislation, a portion of the state's funding shortfall was divided amongst all school districts in New York based on a quote-unquote formula, one of which I could never understand. In each district's state aid was reduced accordingly. The GEA has remained in place through the 2014-15 year in order for the state to continue to address budget challenges while funding other quote-unquote priorities. In the previous 5 state budgets, New York State schools have lost more than $8.8 billion to the GEA. We here in Schoharie County, the rural school districts in Schoharie County, have suffered a great deal financially since the GEA was adopted. I have the numbers, the dollars that have been taken away from our students at the 6 school districts in Schoharie County since the adoption of the 2010-11 school year budgets. Jefferson Central School lost $1.1 million. Sharon Springs, $1.6 million. Gilboa Conesville, $1.7. Middleburg Central, $3.9. Schoharie, $7.2 million, and Cobleskill-Richmondville, $13.2 million. That's a grand total of $28.7 million that has left the county as a result of the gap elimination adjustment. My friends, that is an obscene amount of money, and it has to stop this year. It must stop this year. We are very fortunate to have with us this evening two legislators who recognize the impact that the GEA has had on our ability to educate our students to their fullest potential. Both Senator Seward and Assemblyman Lopez are working very hard to end the GEA, and we should recognize them for that work. Thank you very much. In closing, this is tough to say, but I am hard-pressed to think of a point in history when the profession of educating the students of New York has been at a lower point. As I said, the time to rise above the bureaucratic baloney is, you know how much I wanted to say that? The time to rise above is now. Let's all in this room make sure that the enthusiasm created tonight is maintained and carried all the way to the steps of the Capitol in Albany. Thank you all for listening. It certainly has been my pleasure.
Thank you, Bruce. Next, I want to introduce one of our teachers, Brian Rice. Brian's been teaching 17 years. He spent 6 years at Hunter Tannersville and 11 years at Cobleskill-Richmondville. He is also the parent of 2 school-aged children in the Cobleskill-Richmondville School District. Brian.
Friends, colleagues, honored guests, and parents and students, let me start with this. A bully is defined in the Merriam-Webster Dictionary as a blustering, browbeating person, and the actions of Governor Cuomo in linking necessary state aid with draconian reform measures certainly qualifies as blustering and browbeating. In a time when we focus on teaching our students and children not to bully, Governor Cuomo is sure setting a poor example. The following is an edited letter that I wrote to Governor Cuomo not that long ago, and I share this with you tonight to emphasize some of the many concerns shared by thousands of parents and teachers across this great state. I am not alone in these thoughts, but I implore you to listen to the urgency and importance of what I and we are trying to convey. I share this both as an elementary teacher, as a parent of 2 school-aged children, and as a concerned citizen. Dear Governor Cuomo, I strongly urge you to reconsider your education proposals which you set forth in your annual State of the State address. This misguided emphasis on state exam scores and the teacher's APPR rating will extremely damaging in the long term to the public school system and the students of New York State for many reasons. First and foremost, it takes away most, if not all, local control that we as taxpayers expect and deserve. When you base 50% of a teacher's rating on a single test and 35% on an outside evaluator who knows nothing of our students and our families and our teachers, then we are left with 15% of local control. Unacceptable. There is no research to support staking such a large portion, 50%, on a teacher's overall rating on standardized tests. Tying continued employment and merit pay incentives, which I know we've already spoken about, to such questionable metric is ill-advised and a detriment to both teacher and student. Also of concern is the unclear methodology used by the state of generating standardized test scores and cutoff scores for a passing grade. You mentioned these scores in pointing out failing schools, but unfortunately these scores mean very little, as they are based on brand new Common Core tests that teachers are not allowed to see and arbitrary scores that are set by the state. So comparing our students to those in other states is like comparing apples to oranges. It just makes absolutely no sense. Of particular concern are warnings that have been issued by professional associations of statisticians about the misuse and overemphasis of exam score-based ratings when determining a teacher's effectiveness. In fact, the American Statistician Society reported that using standardized test scores and evaluations can actually lower quality. And when you suggest that schools use outside agencies to conduct teacher observations, two thoughts come to mind. One, who will pay for this? Obviously, us, the taxpayers. And two, what do these observers know about the work that goes on in these classrooms day in and day out? What do they know about the families of our districts? Again, give us back our local control. Let the administrators, teachers, and board members do their jobs that they were hired and elected to do. And my second reason for writing to you is that I am concerned and disappointed with your refusal to put out state local aid runs for our districts. Our schools are already stressed with unfunded mandates and money that has been stripped away due to the minuscule yearly increases and the GEA, or gap elimination adjustment. As a teacher, I can assure you that every teacher that I work with and know puts 110% into their students and families that they serve. The stresses placed on teachers has exploded exponentially recently. The rollout of Common Core happened in 1 year. New APPR requirements were initiated in that same year, and funding was again limited, or in some cases taken away, right when we needed it most. There was very little, and in most cases zero, professional development offered and how to best implement the changes required of the new Common Core, again because of the lack of funds. Appropriate materials are still being developed to accommodate the new Common Core standards, and there are very few resources outside of Engage New York where teachers can turn to help teach students this new curriculum. Again, funds are and were not available for this either. And when you're trying to juggle the demands of a brand new curriculum without the resources and texts with which to teach, and have been provided with little professional development to do so, you're fighting an uphill battle. Combine this with the regular demands of teaching, such as helping students succeed not only academically, but socially, emotionally, and physically. There is no wonder why teachers are already burned out and frustrated. But yet, we forge ahead and do the very best we can for students because we love this job, and in the end, we are not churning out cars and widgets. We are shaping the minds and opening doors for children. My favorite quote comes from the author and publisher Malcolm Forbes, who said this: "The purpose of an education is to replace an empty mind with an open one. This is not an easy task and requires hard work and dedication to accomplish. It is not something that can easily be identified with a simple test or a one-shot observation. It is time to put aside your negativity toward teachers in our public schools. Our teachers are among the most highly trained in the country. Believe in them and the people we hire and elect at the local level to do those jobs. We see the struggles that the families in our communities face. We know when a child is having a bad day or has been through traumatic events. And with all due respect, we know these kids and families better than you ever will. It is our job to work hard and find what works for each child, because we do not strive for standardization. We strive for the best in each child. And what's best for one child may be totally different than what's best for another." And in closing, Governor, and as a citizen of this state, I am hoping for a reply and thoughtful response to the 2 points that I raised. One, will you reconsider the inappropriate and potentially detrimental APPR measures that you proposed that will greatly limit our local control? And two, will you release the aid runs that include substantial increases to cover the necessary burdens that have been placed on local school districts? And that was my letter. Sincerely, Brian Rice. I sent this letter over a month ago. As of today, I have not received a response or a reply. I sent a similar or different letter to Mr. Lopez and Mr. Seward, and I did receive a reply, so thank you very much. Thank you. In closing, I feel that we are at a crossroads, and if we go down the wrong path with stripping away money that our schools need and taking away the local controls of our school, that we may never recover. And as an educator, a parent, and a concerned citizen, we must take back our schools. We must win.
Thank you, Brian. Next, I'd like to introduce Carl Mummenthay. Carl Mummenthay began serving as superintendent of schools at Cobleskill Richmondville in September 2014. We feel very lucky and fortunate to have him. I'm sorry, Jefferson. Sorry, Michelle. Okay. Previously, he served as superintendent at Jefferson Central School for 9 years. Throughout his career, he's worked as a high school English teacher, a staff development specialist, and a middle and high school principal. Carl is a proud alumnus of Jefferson Central School. He earned his undergrad degree at SUNY Oneonta and earned graduate degrees at Universities of New Hampshire and the University of New England. He's an active volunteer, and he's served on numerous boards and committees, including the SUNY Oneonta College Council, the SUNY Oneonta Alumni Association Board of Directors, the Liberal Arts and Science Advisory Committee for SUNY Cobleskill, and the Executive Board for the local Boy Scout Council. He currently serves as Scoutmaster for Troop 50 in Jefferson. He and his wife, Tabitha, a social studies teacher at Oneonta Middle School, reside in Jefferson with their 2 children. Carl Mummenthay.
Boy, it's so appropriate that I speak following Brian Rice, because I have the easiest topic of the agenda tonight, which is talking about the importance of a high-quality teacher in every classroom. And we're so lucky to have teachers like Brian working at Cobleskill Richmondville. So let's talk for a moment about our governor. If there's one thing that he's good at, it's framing a message to his advantage. Just a few short years ago, he introduced the concept of a tax levy limit, and he framed it in such a way that most people understood it as a 2% cap, except that it's not a cap and it's not 2%. This year, we have a governor who's trying to convince our New Yorkers that our state's teachers are failing us. And he points to data like sudden drops in proficiency rates on the state's ELA and math assessments as evidence of their failure. On paper, perhaps he has a point. Our proficiency rates did drop, and you saw some slides regarding that Terry was kind enough to share. Roughly, we dropped from 70% proficiency to 30% proficiency. But here's the rest of the story. The assessments were rescaled to a new curriculum that teachers had just started teaching. We assessed different material, more challenging material, and everyone, educators, parents, school boards, and even students, knew that the proficiency rates were going to temporarily drop. This is the equivalent of a coach training athletes to run a 7-minute mile for years, and then suddenly telling them, now we'd like to see you run a 5-minute mile. And guess what happens when you change the standards? The proficiency rates temporarily drop as people train to meet those standards. Now, the athletes who can't run that 5-minute mile, they didn't fail, did they? No. And the coaches who were training them didn't fail? Of course not. And I have news for you. Our teachers in New York State didn't fail either, and neither did the millions of school children taking those assessments. So let me tell you a little something about Schoharie County's teachers. They've worked very hard over the past few years to adopt new and tougher learning standards in their classrooms. They've attended countless hours of training sessions during the school day, before school, after school, and during their time in the summer. And they've worked tirelessly with teams of colleagues to adopt new curriculum documents and to improve the quality of instruction in their classrooms. Our region is served by some truly accomplished professionals. Did you know that we have 10 nationally board-certified teachers working in Schoharie County? They've submitted themselves to a rigorous process of self and peer review to secure their certifications. Did you know that we have 5 New York State master teachers working in our county's schools? They've been recognized by the governor's office, that governor. And they've been recognized for their outstanding work in the areas of science, mathematics, and technology. They'll be participating in a rigorous 3-year program filled with staff development and mentoring opportunities, and they've been recognized as the very best of the best in their fields. We also have teachers who have been awarded numerous recognitions at the local, state, and national levels for teaching excellence. Here at Cobleskill-Richmondville, we have a team of teachers that was recently recognized at Rady's Elementary School with the Beveridge Family Teaching Award, a national award from the American Historical Association. We have another teacher, Colleen Sheehan, at our high school, who was awarded the prestigious Dorothy Ludwig Award from the New York State Association of Foreign Language Teachers. In Schoharie Central School, we have teachers who've earned similar accolades, with 2 teachers earning prestigious awards from the National Council of English Teachers, and another teacher who was just one of 6 recipients nationwide for an Innovative Teaching Award. You'll find these accolades in each of our schools, in Middleburg, Jefferson, Gilboa-Conesville, and Sharon Springs too. But beyond all of these honors and accolades, here's what I know. Our region's teachers are hardworking. They're dedicated to their profession. They deliver their best each and every day. They're professional, and most importantly, they view their work with our children and your children not just as a job, but as a calling. They mentor children, they wipe runny noses, they attend concerts and athletic events, they find lost mittens, especially this winter. They coach teams, they advise clubs, they celebrate student successes, and they share in their grief. They support students academically and emotionally. They freely give students the tools they need to be successful, even when that giving comes right out of their own pockets. We're lucky to have them here in Schoharie County. We're lucky they're working with our region's children, and I am proud to call them colleagues. So let's talk about the policy questions. Do we have work to do as educators in New York? You bet we do. None of us are satisfied with 30% or 40% proficiency. We also need better tools to evaluate teachers and principals, and we're willing to come to the table with the governor and the legislature and talk about best practices when it comes to evaluation of teachers and principals. Our job is to ensure students are strong readers, clear writers, and bold creative thinkers. And to accomplish that work, we need to build each other up and not push one another down. I think it's way too easy for our governor, from his office in the Capitol in Albany, to criticize the great work of our teachers right here in Schoharie County. And like many, I'd encourage him to come down and visit us, to spend some time in our classrooms, to meet our teachers and their students, and to learn about our success. I think if he spent a few days in Schoharie County, he'd have an entirely different opinion on the quality of teaching in New York State. If you're a teacher in this room, I'd like you to raise your hand, please. Take a good look around, because these are the people who help us achieve our success, and they're also the surest pathway to our future success for the future of Schoharie County. As an administrator, I'm proud of their work, and as a parent of 2 school-age children, I am most appreciative of your efforts on behalf of our county's children. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mumenthe. Our next speaker is a student from Schoharie High School, Greg Meddock. He is a high school honors student. He loves everything science, I've been told, especially physics. He also enjoys math, sports, drama, and a variety of other activities. He's going to speak to you tonight about that personal connection between teachers and students, what really matters.
Hello. Okay, so as a sophomore in high school, I can look back and see the changes that have happened over the last few years, and I don't like what I see. The year started off with bubbles, lots and lots of bubbles. Instead of jumping into our subjects, we all wasted time taking tests on what we don't know. That's right, instead of a test on what we did know, we took a test on what we didn't know. So picture coming in, eager to get started, and instead spending the first few days bubbling the answers we didn't know. Of course, many students would just randomly answer anything and then stare out the window, waiting for the actual education to start a few days later. Then we have to take a test at the end of the year. Again, unless it's tied directly to our grade, there's really no reason to take it seriously. So lots of kids just spend another few days filling in bubbles and wasting time. Again. So I'm not stupid, I know what really matters. It's the real learning that happens between the teacher and the student, not what's on a standardized test. It's the human interaction piece that can't be measured that makes the final difference. These tests aren't testing what really matters. What really matters is individuality, values, personal relationships, in other words, the human experience. These are the things that happen in between those meaningless tests. These are the lessons we learn and remember and use for a lifetime. I remember clearly respecting my teachers from the first day I walked into school. Now all I hear from our governor is how our schools are failing and our teachers are ineffective. In 9th grade, we read To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. In it, the protagonist, Atticus Finch, suggests that if you really want to know what someone else is going through, then you should walk a mile in their shoes. Governor Cuomo, try walking a mile in the shoes of a Schoharie student. You have forced us to do the thing that we hate the most by wasting our time taking meaningless tests. You have grossly underfunded our school so that we have to fundraise in order to have a full sports program. You have tried to shred our confidence in our teachers by constantly criticizing them. And yet you call yourself the advocate for students. Thanks, but I think I'll stick with the people who really care about me and advocate for me on a daily basis. My parents, my community, and my teachers. Senator Seward. Senator Seward and Assemblyman Lopez, please take this message back to Albany and into your chambers. We get one shot at a high school education. We need your help. Please advocate for us.
Thank you, Greg. Before I introduce our next guest, I want to take a minute to thank all the people that worked to put this program together tonight. I worked very hard with several other local presidents. Carrie Brooks from Schoharie Teachers Association. And where are you, Carrie? Stand up. Susan Peter from Middleburg Teachers Association. Thank you, Susan. Randy Gunther, formerly Schoharie Teachers Association, now NYSA something or other. Terry Burton from Middleburg and Schoharie. Which hat do you want to wear today? And Jim Green from NYSA. And Stacy Crusoe Sharp from Amsterdam Teachers Association. Did I get everybody? I think I did. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for working hard and putting this together tonight. Our next guest is a parent, Amanda Hantho. Amanda currently is a lecturer at SUNY Cobleskill, French and first-year experience. Is that for like freshmen, Amanda? Okay. All right. It's been a long time. Huh? She is a mother of 4 students. Noah is a 10th grader, Maggie is a 7th grader, Caleb is a 2nd grader, and Micah is a kindergarten student. And she is also the wife of a high school math teacher and a coach. So she's seen a lot of program changes. She's here to talk to us tonight about how these program changes and cuts have affected her own children. Thank you.
As Dawn mentioned, I am a mother of 4 students, but they span 10 years, so it gives me an interesting perspective. I know what the district looked like in 2004 when Noah entered as a kindergartner. And what I see is a very different experience that Micah will have entering in 2014. While I don't claim to understand the numbers, that's why I married a math teacher. I don't have to know numbers now. I do have a clear vision of what the gap elimination adjustment has done to my kids' school. So that $13 million that Mr. Tryon mentioned. Micah in kindergarten won't experience the field trips that his siblings took because they were cut when there wasn't enough funding. Caleb is in a second grade class of 25 students because staff has been cut so drastically in the last few years to meet budgets. His siblings' classes were never that large, and they weren't even trying to tackle the Common Core. Maggie didn't experience GATE or Young Scholars because programs for gifted children aren't mandated, and the budget must meet those unfunded mandates first. She also played this year on a basketball team with more than 20 other girls. You know, they only play 5 at a time. So we no longer, though, have enough coaching positions or programs to meet the needs of our students. When funding was taken from our athletic budget was deeply cut, the effect of which we're still investigating and dealing with. Unless you think Noah skated by without feeling any effects, we've been planning his high school schedule, hoping to compete with students seeking college acceptance. We face limited choices because of a decimated business program and a devastated technology department, as well as reduced staff again, causing some classes to be offered 1 time a day. Our brightest students must choose between orchestra and technology, foreign language or physics. You can't take both. They're offered at the same time, and we don't have enough choices and enough teachers. These are just examples from my 4 kids, and my kids are still getting a great education, the best the money can buy. Their teachers have risen to the occasion, and they continue to do their best, and I'm very thankful for that. And whether or not it was okay 5 years ago to start stealing from education to balance the state budget, it is no longer okay. Governor Cuomo needs to hear the message that there is no gap, and he needs to give back the money that we were due and stop stealing from our kids. Stop stealing their experiences, stop stealing their programs, stop stealing their teachers and their opportunities. Fund our schools so that we can provide the education that all kids need.
Thank you, Amanda. Our next speaker is Michelle Weaver. Michelle is the superintendent at Middleburg Central School. Right? Yes. Sorry, I was confusing Middleburg and Schoharie. Michelle has been an educator for 31 years. Before she was the superintendent at Middleburg Central School, she was an administrator at Oppenheim Ephrata Central School for 8 years. She has been a learning disability specialist at Herkimer County Community College and a special education teacher at Fort Plain Central School and Canastota Central School. She is going to speak to us tonight about remembering what is right for public schools.
I am also the proud parent of 3 children. Currently, I have a surprise child in 10th grade at Middleburg Central School. I had a daughter who graduated from Middleburg Central School, and she is one of the proud coaches at Cobleskill Central School. So I love Schoharie County. With that being said, I took a little different perspective when I wrote my words because I think I'm very tired of the bashing that's going on and the negativity. So I just wanted to remember what is right about public schools. There's been so much noise in recent years about what is wrong with public education that it has started to overshadow what is right. And even with all the politics, mandates, and budget constraint, there is still plenty right with our schools. According to the state constitution, we are charged with giving each student a sound basic education, but no one settles for basic. When it comes to educating our children on a daily basis, teachers and staff in our district strive to fulfill unspoken pledge to our students that we will give them the tools needed to live a successful life in the 21st century. Honoring that pledge gets more challenging every year, with each new constraint placed on public schools by the state, from budget blows by the GEA and the tax levy cap, to the less than ideal rollout of the Common Core standards. We face seemingly endless challenges to continue to offer our students far more than a sound basic education. But through every obstacle, we find a way to succeed. And it is a testament to the resourcefulness and creativity of teachers that they continue to strive to deliver much more than basic knowledge, regardless of the challenges they face. Instructors continue each year to do more with less while increasing the standards students and parents have come to expect. We constantly talk about maximizing resources, thinking outside the box, and developing new ways to honor that pledge of delivering a 21st century education. Even as the public school fiscal crisis endures and additional unfunded mandates are forced upon us, teachers continue to find innovative ways to deliver quality education. At Middleburg, we have seen an increase in teacher collaboration, cross-curriculum integration, and creative solutions to ensure we fulfill that pledge. Unfortunately, if you were to ask a parent or a community member what is right with public education, the responses may not accurately reflect what is transpiring, as most people have not witnessed what is going on in our schools. Many of our hardest critics have not been in a public school for many years, even decades, and there are some who have never stepped foot in a public school. We have to get better at providing opportunities for people to witness our great things firsthand. One of the real tragedies is that many of us know the truth and have witnessed great learning taking place, and we remain silent while our schools are criticized. Think back to the last time you had a bad meal or a poor service. How many people did you tell? If you are like most of us, you told quite a few. As a society, we tend to concentrate on the negative. When we turn on the evening news and we pick up the morning paper, it's easy to feel disheartened and wonder what the world is coming to, as bad news stories seem to dominate our time. Unfortunately, bad news sells. To find good stories, it takes time and often much to delve deeper to discover the positive. I am grateful that I get to find the positive, to see what's actually inside of our schools. Through the eyes of the media, our schools, as well as public education as a whole, are struggling. Top stories include Common Core, APPR, gap elimination adjustment, lack of services, or social issues such as bullying. In no way do I mean to minimize these issues, as I am passionate about education and want what is best for our students and staff. These concerns need to be addressed, though they need not take a precedent over what is right with our schools. Our public schools have incredible strengths and successes that deserve just as much, if not more, attention. Let's celebrate the value that schools bring to our communities. More people need to know and appreciate the fact that in rural communities, school and community are indeed one and the same. When the nonstop talk about budget cuts, the economy, and how it's affecting our schools, it's easy to feel frustrated and negative about our children's learning environment. If you're an educator, it's even more difficult because you have to fight to keep your work positive and effective under the constant barrage of negative publicity. The simple fact is that our schools have and will continue to provide quality education for all of our children. There are many accounts of successful programs and achievements happening throughout Schoharie County. I believe that you'll agree with me when I say that our children are being well prepared for adulthood, equipped with knowledge, a lifelong love of learning, and the necessary skill set to become successful in society. We are educating culturally, socially, and economically diverse students. For that, we often have the undying gratitude of our communities. But it often doesn't feel that way. Underfunded and misunderstood, with increasing pressure to produce results, public schools are facing a test of epic proportions. I have a great job. I love it. As a superintendent in a small rural school, every day is unique. To be honest, I never know exactly what I'm going to come to when I get to work. On paper, I am the educational leader, and I am the manager of many, many tasks. In reality, it's much more. Every day, I fulfill many roles. I'm a teacher, I'm a counselor, I'm a guider, I'm a learner, a mentor, a facilitator, and a member of an exciting and thriving community. I get to see remarkable teachers guide students through engaging lessons. I also get to see students excited when they reach new milestones and accomplish learning goals. I get to walk through hallways where there is a level of energy unparalleled anywhere else. I witnessed students developing character, taking responsibility, and making positive contributions, both in and out of school. I am grateful for the vantage point that I have, though I think I am guilty, like some of you, and don't always take every opportunity to share with others how awesome our schools are. As a parent and an educator, I see this as one of our strengths. Each of our students is unique. Students go to school to learn curriculum, but they also need to learn how to relate to one another. They develop character as they learn to appreciate each other, help one another, work collaboratively. Public schools give students an opportunity to acclimate to the real world. Watching our students graduate every year, I am inspired and proud of whom they have become, and am excited to see where they will go. With the ongoing dedication, resourcefulness, and creativity of our teachers and staff, we will never have to settle for a sound, basic education, but instead will continue to exemplify all that is right with public schools and offer our students the best chance for a successful life outside of those buildings. Public school is a great place to learn and a great place to work. Let's start talking about what's right with our wonderful schools.
Before I introduce our next guest, I want to make sure everybody has a pin. Does everybody have a pin? Okay, these pins are really hot items. You'll probably be able to sell them on eBay someday. They're very difficult to get. Okay, so thank you, Doreen, for getting the pins. There's a story behind the pin. If you don't know it, I'll just share it very quickly. There's a teacher, Sean Kroll, from East Greenbush Central School District. There was a reception at the governor's mansion on New Year's Eve, so several people from the area went, and he was lucky enough to win a lottery to go in and speak with the governor, and he was wearing this lovely pin. And he was asked in going through security to take it off. Seems they banned it because it was propaganda. So rather than making a scene, he complied. He took the pin off, put it in his pocket or whatever. Maybe they confiscated it, I'm not sure. But ever since then, the pin has become very popular. So they're really hard to get. Make sure you get a pin on your way out. And like I said, maybe you'll be able to sell it on eBay someday. It took me about 2 months to get my pins. But again, thank you, Doreen, for keeping my pins safe. My next guest is Kim Denuzzo. She is a kindergarten teacher at Schoharie Elementary School. Kim has worked in the computer industry as a web programmer before deciding to pursue her childhood aspiration of becoming a teacher. She's been teaching 7 years. She taught 7 years as a special ed teacher and reading specialist in many different environments, including a charter school. And she is here to share with us an experience and let us know how she feels charter schools did not really help her students, or I want to say failed her students. Kim Denuzzo.
Hi, thank you. Actually, very quick little anecdote about the pins. Last week, I was in a Stewart's parking lot, and a woman backed into my car. And I had my jacket on, I have my pin on, and the children in this woman's car said, "Mom, I can't believe you just backed into a teacher's car." And they knew that I was a teacher because I had my pin on. So proudly wear those pins because they definitely represent who we are. So as Dawn said, I was a charter school teacher. I taught special ed in 6th grade. And I actually taught at Brighter Choice Charter Middle School for Boys, as we know was just in the news last week. I was going to talk to you today about how the education that students receive at charter schools is like our standardized tests. One size fits all. However, last Friday, I found out that the charter school that I worked at is closing at the end of this year. As I watched the news and I saw my former students fighting for their school to stay open, I cried. I cried for these children who are so very much like our own children in Schoharie. Children who may not have a lot of stability in their homes. Children who come from poverty. Children who come to school hungry every day. I cried for them because despite all of that, the one stability they had in their life was that school and those teachers. However, charter schools are a business, and like most businesses these days, they fail, and they fail our students. The charter school model has preyed on communities where poverty is prevalent. In these areas, the public schools face many more challenges than their wealthier counterparts, hence making charter schools look more appealing. Often, the families in these communities are provided with a sense of false hope that what they're getting is something better than what they had. But when in reality, what they're getting is much, much worse. Most charter schools are elementary schools, largely due to the fact that these businesses do not need to provide our youngest learners the opportunities to enrich their learning, such as intramurals, athletics, technology, music, art. These are not state requirements, and since they are not state requirements, these businesses choose not to provide them. Under the governor's proposed education reforms, a school that fails for 3 years in a row will fall under state receivership, where foundations, many of which are run by businessmen and hedge fund managers, take over the school and run it like a business. All activities and programs that are not required by the state would be on the chopping block. The stability that the students have known would be put in jeopardy each and every year, as the possibility that that charter school business model is going to fail increases. This business model failed my former students, and now they are left with the instability of not knowing what their education is going to look like next year. As any of the teachers in this room can tell you, when those kids walk into that classroom, those kids become our children. We are their cheerleaders. We are their parents. We are their therapists. And to think that these students that come from so little have even less now. This is not the future that I want for the kindergartners in my class, or the kids that I coach in track, or any of the students in our schools across the state. Students have the right to a free and appropriate education, not a fire sale on their learning. Is this the future that you want for your students? Is this the future and education that you want for your children? Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Our next guest is Melissa Osfeld. Melissa previously is our high school building principal. Before that, she served as an assistant principal for 3 years. She's been the principal for 7 years. Previous to coming to CRCS, Melissa spent 10 years at Northville School District as a high school reading teacher, middle school social studies teacher, and a dean of students. Melissa has 2 middle school aged children, Trey and Peyton, and she is our next speaker. Where are you, Melissa?
Thank you, Dawn, for inviting me to speak and say a few words on behalf of the Cobleskill-Richmondville Administrator Association. I have a short story to share with all of you. As a new administrator in July of 2005, I proudly stepped into the Cobleskill-Richmondville High School and I began a new career path. I quickly became familiar with the comprehensive programming and opportunities that our medium-sized rural school offers to its community. Educational programming that invites students to participate at advanced levels in almost every department. A choice for students to explore a vocation or technical experience. Opportunities for students to receive instruction with technology-aided devices. Chances for students to engage in on-the-job experiences, and the ability to select an alternative learning environment that meets their needs. I was also able to familiarize myself with the extensive array of extracurricular offerings. Offerings that keep many of our students motivated to come to school each and every day. Offerings that train our students to work together as a team, and offerings that teach our students life lessons. With a staff of 80, it took me some time to get to know them. But over time, I quickly realized that the team I recently joined was dedicated to student learning, committed to student growth, and passionate about their profession. Today, 10 years later at CR, some of the story I'm sharing with you has changed, and as I am sure many districts can speak to it, we've lost programming. We've lost choices. We've lost opportunities. We've lost experiences. We've lost staffing, and we are required to do more with less. Today, 10 years later at CR, some of the story I'm sharing with you has stayed the same, as I am sure many districts can speak to. We still have an obligation to prepare our students for the future. We still have the same number of kids that show up at our doorsteps each and every day. We still have students that require an alternative way to learn. We still have students competing for college. But we still, friends, have dedicated, committed, passionate professionals that care about the future of our educational system. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Osfeld. Our next speaker is Dr. Catherine Gerbino. Dr. Gerbino is the interim superintendent at Schoharie Central School this year. Prior to that, she was the assistant superintendent of the Capital Region BOCES for 10 years and the chief operating officer at Parsons Child and Family Center for 12 years. I'd like to invite Dr. Gerbino.
Yes, that's correct. The pronunciation is Gerbino. So it's no shock that Mario Cuomo is one of my heroes. And I'm going to tell you a personal story. His 1984 convention speech just rocked me. It had two great themes: the tale of two cities and rising up from poverty on the wings of a solid public educational system. How ironic, then, that 3 decades and just 1 generation later, his son occupies the office Mario called the highest job in the greatest state, in the greatest nation on earth. The policies made there now only further divide the haves from the have-nots, and the pathway out of poverty and ignorance through our public schools gets narrower and narrower, and our neediest more and more likely to fail in their attempts to find an equitable opportunity to advance. Now, the great state of New York has shifted a significantly larger share of the costs of pre-K through grade 12 education right back to you, the local taxpayer, hurting low poverty wealth school districts like ours and the students who attend them. Worst yet, New York State has enacted a local property tax levy cap that virtually ensures that that inequity on per pupil disparity will widen every year, and our youth will fall further and further behind. That shining city that Mario talked about just got more distant and more unattainable to our community, who love our children just as much, and whose children are even more dependent upon high-quality schools to provide upward mobility and success. I'm fortunate. I live now in a high-wealth community where the latest conversation and buzz was about what programs not to cut, but what to add. Not about reduced state aid, but gee, how quickly were they going to get the Wi-Fi for their many sports fields up on board so that the parents and communities attending the outdoor events could remain plugged into the internet while they were enjoying Saturday night football in a stadium under the lights? That's where I live. And I drive to a community that depends upon state aid for nearly 1/2 of our revenue. The GEA, Gap Elimination Act, for 2014 reduced our state aid again by another 9.76%, directly causing a tax levy to our hardworking homeowners, 11.39% higher than it had otherwise been. In a community where many people struggle simply to make ends meet, we don't wonder about the outdoor Wi-Fi at a cost of $2 million and when it's going to happen. We wonder, will we ever be able to restore funding to our JV sports teams, cut when those reductions occurred in 2010-11, 2011-12, 2012-13, and the march continues? How many more key services, like transportation and food services, do we have to farm out or share? I'm going to read you a list of other cuts in my district, and imagine how those shining cities on the hill would accept these losses. And what have this meant for our kids, your brothers and sisters, your daughters and sons, and your grandchildren? This is what we lost: an industrial arts teacher, a social studies teacher, high school science teacher, a physical education teacher, our high school home and careers teacher, full-time French teacher, gone, gone, and gone. High school library aide, elementary library aide. We close our elementary library when there aren't people there and our children can't take those books out and benefit from literacy. Our audiovisual aide, elementary teaching positions, teacher aides, teacher assistants, cleaners, 2 bus runs, reductions in our student supplies, classroom furniture, the chairs our children sit on, our sports equipment and our uniforms, gone, gone, and gone. Since 2010, the impact of our state's policy on state aid under the gap elimination cost our students, fewer than 1,000 students, cost them more than $7 million in lost aid. An average of $1.4 million reduction every year in each of the past 5 years. I don't know about you, I couldn't run my household on 10% a year less for 10 years in a row without going to have to eat Chef Boyardee. And I'd never eat Chef Boyardee. Not gonna happen. Nah. By the luck of our circumstances, by the pure luck of our circumstances, we're born into a city on the hill, or we're born into its poorer relative. And the great equalizers of those circumstances beyond our control has always been in this wonderful country and in this great state: access to a high-quality public education, where opportunities abound for those people willing to work hard, to pull themselves up and become whatever they're capable of. Like Mario Cuomo, this has been true for me, and I'm blessed to say so. And without an overhaul of failed policies that end this gap elimination adjustment and restore funding to our lowest wealth schools, the path that was available to me, up and out of poverty, up and out of ignorance, and so many others, will simply not be there for far too many of our children. And that's true of our entire county and our communities. We will still have some shining schools on the hill, and the others will be schools of despair that shutter opportunities, thwart students' interest, and close the door to our children's future. And we can simply not allow for that to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jarbino. Jarbino. Do I have to use the hands when I say Jarbino? Thank you. Okay. I have one more speaker. Before I introduce him, I want to just thank everybody for coming out tonight and staying. I know it was a long program. I kept getting warned and yelled at for adding speakers, but they all did a really wonderful job, and I am going to introduce our last speaker and thank him again for staying so late. Joe Barron is a high school student, and he's exhausted from track practice. So I appreciate him waiting it out till the end. But I wanted to save him for last because it really is about the students. So I want him to really get the last word in. Joe is a senior at CRCS. He is the captain of the cross-country team, indoor track, outdoor track. He's the president of FBLA. He's the president of National Honor Society. Joe plans on majoring in business in the fall at the college of his choice. I think he's keeping it a secret for now, although I saw a post, something on your wall there.
My wall. Parents' wall, probably.
Parents' wall? I won't tell, but college of his choice. And he plans on running in college as well. So I want to bring up Joe Barron.
Good evening. As a student of the New York State public high school system, I can tell you firsthand that Governor Cuomo has hurt and degraded the system far worse than we ever could have imagined. When the state budget needed to be balanced, our governor made the choice to attack public schools and cut our funding. Seriously? Cutting funds instead of investing in the future of our students who will one day grow up and run our state and nation? It just doesn't make sense to me. Since middle school, I, like my fellow students, have not been able to receive the same education as our predecessors who graduated before the cuts took place. Entering 6th grade, I couldn't wait to do all the activities and go on all the field trips that my older friends had done. All educational fun trips that I looked forward to doing when I became like the big kids. Through no fault of the schools or our district, like so many other districts across the state, were forced into making cuts to balance their own budget after the state cut funds for schools. First, the field trips went. Then the school supplies were cut. Then, our teachers began to be let go so that the district could save money. Several new teachers that were hard-working, everyday citizens lost their jobs. From all over the school, this became the new horror. Who or what would go next? I was terrified. Being the son of 2 teachers, I remember coming home sick to my stomach. What if my parents lost their jobs? No student should have to be afraid of going to school every day because they did not know what or who was going to be cut next. I love my state, but now due to the tight restrictions in our school system from the lack of proper funding for our budget, fear has taken place. All the field trips were gone. I would not be able to visit those sites, learn and see real-world places due to the cuts. In 8th grade, students in the past had gone on an overnight trip to Washington, D.C., and that too was now gone. Our school, once a happy, educational place, and now it has become a shadow of what it once was and a lost dream of what it should have been. On to high school and the Cuomo regime. As soon as Governor Cuomo was elected, new changes began to take place. The wrong kind of change. Even more cuts began to take place because of decreased funding from the state. Class sizes increased, putting more stress on students and teachers. No school field trips for our district, so as to not put another financial burden on parents who had to pay increased school taxes to cover the shortfall from the state. All in the name of helping the state reduce its deficit. A problem not created by students, teachers, parents, or schools, yet we had to pay the highest price. Still, Governor Cuomo continues to point the finger at us. According to Governor Cuomo, teachers are the enemy. They are the reason students are doing poorly in school. Ridiculous! Some kids are just not motivated to do the work. Some kids come to school ill-prepared due to issues of poverty or other problems that they cannot control. Until Governor Cuomo realizes that these concerns need to be addressed, teachers should not have to be graded based on test results. Teachers are graded and evaluated by the results of state tests that teachers have no control over. Outside firms write the test, not the teachers who actually teach the class. Therefore, teachers are not the bad guys that our governor in Time magazine makes them out to be. What is even more ridiculous is the fact that younger grade levels have to take these exams as well. Why? Kids that age should be having fun, learning fundamentals of subjects, manners, sharing, leadership skills, not how to fill in a bubble. Teachers are here to help us learn and succeed in the real world by teaching us the tools of success. English, social studies, math, science, business, agriculture, art, music, the list goes on and on. The fact that Governor Cuomo sees these teachers as evil is not right. Point the finger in the right direction, Governor. Right back at yourself. Come to our public school. See for yourself that we aren't bad people. Bring us back to the funding levels that our schools need and deserve to the best opportunities for all students, not the select few. Stop the blame game for public schools, Governor, and do the right thing. Support free public education. I want to take this time to thank my teachers. I can see some of them in the audience, and some of them aren't here because they're really busy doing other stuff. I want to thank Mr. Levine, I can see here, Mr. Weiss, I can see Miss Nichols over here. I want to thank you all, and then I want to also thank Miss Bristol, who's the sole business teacher of the high school due to the cuts. She's the only one that there's been for the past couple of years. So I want to thank you and all the teachers that let me speak here tonight. So thank you very much.
I think our students stole the show tonight. Thank you to all the speakers. Before you go, I'm going to ask the Assemblyman and the Senator to come up. I don't know who wants to come up first. Do you want to do rock, paper, scissors? Do you know how to play? I can show. Well, let me introduce Senator Jim Seward.
There you go. Well, thank you, Dawn, and thank all of you. I tell you, wow, what a night this has been. And this is, I know we're here talking about some of the budget issues and other, reform policy issues and so on. But, in listening to students and some of our administrators, parents, and so on, I think this is a great night to celebrate all that's good in public education right here in Schoharie County. I think Dawn had started the evening, I think, in the right way and said it all when she said that strong schools equal strong communities. I come here before you as your state senator, but also in my household, public education is very, very important. My wife, she's now retired, but she was involved with our local school in my community of Milford over in Otsego County. For a number of years. My daughter is a first grade teacher at Worcester Central School. I have a little granddaughter who is a kindergartner at Greater Plains School in Oneonta. And, I was on a panel earlier this week, not education related. It had to do with my chairmanship of the Insurance Committee in the Senate, and it was before an insurance crowd. But they wanted to kind of get to know some of the people on the panel. So they asked you questions like, what inspired you to get into public service? And you know what? I answered that question. I didn't have to hesitate a bit. It was my 5th grade teacher at Valley View School in Oneonta, John Clapp, who really turned me on to current events, and we had debates, and I'm still doing all that today because of my 5th grade teacher, and I'll never forget that. It's no question that these have been challenging times in public education these last few years. When you think about the poor implementation of the Common Core, APPR, the testing, data collection, I mean, the list goes on and on. All of these challenges at the very same time, because of the GEA, the Gap Elimination Adjustment, the resources in our schools have been diminished. These are extremely challenging times. And despite all of that, there are great things happening every day in our local schools. I'm in the buildings all the time throughout my 9-county district, and I've been in every school here in Schoharie County. And you know, that's exactly why when I sat back in January 21st listening to the governor's State of the State message and his budget presentation, you know, when he hit through that harsh rhetoric, you know, talking about failing schools, ineffective teachers, I thought to myself, what's this guy talking about? That's not the case. That's not the case that I know is happening in the communities and the schools that I represent in the state Senate. There was just a disconnect with reality. And then, of course, you know, with his budget presentation, you know, the ultimatums, you've got to do this if you're going to get aid for your schools. We have to pass this reform package if you're going to get aid for your schools. I mean, using our kids as pawns and our schools held hostage to get his way. And I'll tell you why he didn't ever release any runs. I think he'd be embarrassed to do that because it would show just how bad his proposals are. Now, fast forward to today. This afternoon, both houses of the legislature passed budget resolutions, our response to what the governor had proposed back in January. And I can speak to our Senate budget resolution. And this reflects what has been my #1 budget priority this year as it relates to education. Our Senate resolution, we totally eliminate the gap elimination this year. That means that where are the math teachers here tonight? I think that's that alone brings in over $3.5 million additional dollars into Schoharie County. In some of our schools, like Cobleskill Richmondville, $1.8 million more. Schoharie over $1 million. And the other schools, all schools benefit greatly. And beyond that, our total pack, that's about a little over $1 billion. And beyond that, our total package is $1.9 billion. And the balance represents an equitable distribution of additional aid. And we also uncouple some of these reforms that we've talked about here tonight with the aid. I mean, nothing's dependent on one and the other. And our budget resolution calls for modifications and, in some cases, outright rejection of the governor's reform package. You know, I personally have grave concerns about this reform package. You know, that greater reliance on these state tests, you know, in evaluating a teacher. These independent or outside evaluators, observers coming in to evaluate our teachers. No connection with our school, no connection with our community. And they'll come in, and who's going to pay for these? That was a legitimate question. And sure, they'll be in there, they'll check a few boxes, maybe write a narrative or something, and then they're off. Not there as a principal or the other normal observer would be to work if a teacher needs some improvement. Not there to work with that teacher, and you know, that type of communication, totally irrelevant. And some of the tenure changes, you know, under his proposal, you know, a teacher could be in school for 20 years or more and never get tenure because of the flawed evaluation system. You know, some changes may be needed. I would be the first to admit, but let's get the stakeholders together. Let's take the time to get it right, not jam it down the throats of our school districts and our communities. So the next steps in our process at the Capitol, you know, I'd say there is a general feeling. I think even the governor, I think, has begun to realize this, that, you know, it's important to get an on-time budget, but we have a lot of work to do over the next 3 weeks. And the process is, now that both houses have passed resolutions, budget resolutions, we are immediately starting conference committees. And as I was sitting here tonight listening to our speakers, I have been, I just got a notice on my phone, I've been named to the Education Conference Committee on behalf of the Senate, one of 5. And as I sit there at that negotiating table, I can assure you that I will be continuing to advocate for adequate and fair funding for our schools, more local control, respect for our teachers in that great profession. And you can count on me to stand up for what all kids need. Thank you very much. Do you want to take questions? Or at the end? Do you want to take questions? Or okay. I mean, I'd be happy to respond to any questions, or if anyone had one or two. I don't want to. We want to hear from our assemblyman. Yes.
I have a question. To be honest, very few of us voted for Governor Cuomo upstate. It was really downstate that carried him in a couple of pockets. So what do you feel is the climate in terms of the legislators? How are they feeling? Everything I've heard from our upstate legislators, you're in our corner, you're fighting back against Governor Cuomo, you're trying to reinstate what we need and what is fair. But what are you seeing as the temperature downstate?
Well, even though in the Senate and our majority, I mean, we're heavily upstate, although we have downstate members as well, and it has been our conferences, legislators from Long Island, and we have a couple in New York City as well as Hudson Valley upstate, and we have been united that this is the year to get rid of the gap elimination adjustment, and then to build on that going forward with the funding. So that's not an upstate downstate, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Senate in terms of the funding question. There are differences of opinion on some of these reform packages that is in that. We're still discussing that, but in all cases we are looking for modifications and some or outright rejection there. I don't see this as a. We are a very diverse state, and one of our is geographic. But there's a big difference between Manhattan and Middleburg. But on these issues, I don't see that. I think it cuts, at least in my house, it's not. It's pretty. We're pretty united. That we have. I'm proud to say we've stood up for education. We're as a body, and we're going to continue.
Yes. It was reported today that the Senate Republican Conference had supported 50% of a teacher's evaluation to be based on the state test scores. Being on the Education Committee now, and knowing that even the governor has declared these tests unreliable to judge students, and they also passed a 5-year moratorium for that, how can the Senate justify using those scores to rate teachers? And even more specifically, is that something that you would support?
No, and I'm not sure what you're reading from. Our budget resolution specifically says we're going to modify, we favor modifying that proposal. So I'm not sure what information you have. But I can tell you that I served already on the budget subcommittee for education for the Senate, and it's our recommendation not to go along with that 50% thing, because so I personally and we are not advocating that additional reliance on that test, because that's very, very unfair to the teacher, because you can't a teacher in the public school cannot control who's in their classroom, and in what conditions, family conditions and so on that those students come into their classroom with, that all impact, and their socioeconomic status, that all impacts a student's performance, and so to judge a teacher solely on 50%. In that case, on a test, very, very unfair.
So we kind of need to oppose that, right?
Yes, absolutely. Right. I'll introduce my partner in the Capitol, our Assemblyman Pete Lopez. Unless you have more to say.
And the senator and the assemblyman will both answer some questions, but I wanted to give Mr. Lopez a chance to speak. We're close.
He works good. He works good.
Yes, Pete wanted to say a few words, and then we'll take some more questions. Thank you.
Well, first, I do want to say thank you, and thank you for your conviction, thank you for your passion, and just to let you know you're not alone in this. And I was just chatting with Martin, who I knew as my kids went to school in Schoharie, and in class of 79 in Schoharie. And I have to say, I see many of my classmates here. And as I think about our teachers, our teachers are mentors, our teachers were former classmates, our teachers are friends, our teachers are engaged in the community in so many ways, and our administrators. And we're very blessed to have them be not only in our schools, but also improving the quality of life where we live. And as Dr. Diarbino, I'm Puerto Rican, so I can roll my tongue. I'm pretty good. The school district she described is where I grew up, and where we came working class poor with a hope of a future, and where we worked and scrubbed floors on our hands and knees and put ourselves through college with the love and support of our parents, but also the love and support of a caring administration where we were not just numbers. We were individuals, and we were in band and in choir and drama and sports and student government and after-school activities, and where we each took turns coaching kids soccer and running ski clubs and all those things to reinvest, and where that made a difference for our young people, because we don't want them just to be citizens. We want them to be future leaders, and we heard some of that from these two fine young men. And I have to tell you, Mr. Barron's comment on the governor, if you have a chance, go check the assembly transcript. There was another Mr. Barron, this was from New York City. He let Governor Cuomo have it with both barrels, so you might want to check Mr. Barron's, the Assemblyman Barron's comments. I don't think the governor was too happy with him, so we'll see how that plays out. So I just wanted to say that we're very blessed, and I had the privilege of raising my children and seeing them go from kindergarten to graduation. So my oldest, 29, is just finishing, he'll be graduating from Law Enforcement Academy in Massachusetts. My baby girl, Stephanie, 24, is in Okinawa in the Air Force as an airman and pursuing her career and her education. I'm very proud of both, but both had the benefit and the blessing of growing up in one small rural school where they had the ability to be so many things and participate in so many ways. And that really strengthened them as they move forward. So I can't say enough. So back to Governor Cuomo. So I use an acronym as I travel around 7 counties, do 1,000 miles a week, MBWA, Management by Wandering Around. So as I did that, I wander around even in chambers and when we have these forums. So I'm going to go back to the one question about the temperature. Much of my peer group is from New York City, downstate urban centers. The temperature is red hot. The comments about the governor in the middle of his presentation, and his presentation was more of a monologue and not a dialogue. It was threatening, it was arrogant, it was top down. The comments coming back from my colleagues, I was like, oh, cover my ears. I'm an old altar boy from Schoharie. And I don't know. I'm just telling you. So for the first time, and I would say, this governor has had every opportunity. He started off, well, I think many of us would have to say he started off fairly balanced. He was trying to address upstate, downstate, address challenging issues. But what's happened now, I feel that the temperature is that in both houses for the first time, I suspect that if we advance common initiatives, as Senator was describing, and the governor vetoes them, I think we have the opportunity for the first time to see an override of Governor Cuomo's vetoes. I'm just going to hit some highlights. So gap elimination versus foundation aid. We have a challenge in my chamber. And the challenge is that downstate and big 5 school districts are really not concerned about gap elimination. So in our one House budget resolution, 1.8 million, we're underperforming. The Senate's 100. Yeah, they're ahead of us. We got to do something there. There's a heavy emphasis on foundation aid, about $1 billion for foundation aid, and about $500 million for gap elimination. My basic premise, and this gets back to, we have the Alliance for Quality Education. I'm going to call them out on this because they have been advocating for more foundation aid and working against us with gap elimination, which I was very disheartened. I had a conversation with one of their principal spokesmen. And I've seen that group walk around the Capitol calling for education for every student. Well, my premise is equal education for every student. And that's really where we need to be. So we need to be united in this fight. So we need to reel in our friends from Alliance for Quality Education and make sure they're on the same page, because what they're saying hurts us here, and they need to hear our voice as well. Common Core, just a quick quote that I heard at a forum that we've held across this region. Quote goes like this: "I believe in standardizing automobiles, not human beings." Who can guess where that's from? Albert Einstein. So go figure, think about that. On the mandate relief, we are still underperforming on that score. We have state agencies that continue to address and roll out mandates with impunity. We have to address that, and both the state education department and the regents still need a little education themselves on how our how our schools should function. In terms of the issue with our schools, they need more flexibility, shared services, other program flexibility, and they need proper supports. And we heard some reference to our schools are being asked to do so much more than they used to. I think it might have been one of our students, maybe Mr. Barron. Our schools are everything to every student. They're providing family supports, they're providing counseling, mental health services, social services, drug counseling, things that we really never envisioned years ago, but are so critical and affect the students' performance. So when our teachers and administrators have them for how many hours a day, they can't control what happens in the home. They can't control what happens on the street. So holding them accountable to that standard is unfair and in my mind, unrealistic. So our governor, as an advocate, should be providing the supports to the schools so that our children have a fighting chance. Because in this northern Appalachia that we live in, lack of educational attainment, number of children, percent of children in poverty, all those things that are inner city are part of what we live with too. So he needs to realize that and give it proper support. On the testing, too much testing, need for peer review, need for peer participation in the test development. And ultimately, I'll just stop there so we can take questions, more questions. What we need to do, our job, my job, Senator's job, our colleagues' job, is to give our schools and teachers room to what they do best. Inspire our children, help them reach their full potential. That's our job, that's our mission. So we're so proud of you and your passion, your presence here today. You have more to do. You have to keep making noise because our governor, in my belief, I don't think we pass the budget on April 1st. I think this governor intends to punish us for having the temerity to stand up to him. And I'm a martial artist. We don't stand up, we don't run from bullies. And you folks, and I know you feel the same way, which is why you're all here today. So thank you for letting us be part of this wonderful forum tonight. Thank you. So, yes, I think we can take more questions. Yes.
How can we help? What can we do to help you guys?
Make noise. Be visible. Do what you're doing here today. Work with NYSET, work with school boards, work with your colleagues across the state, and increase the volume. Senator, any other thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree. This is very, very impressive what I see here tonight, and this is happening. I've been at other forums in other parts of my district. This is very, very impressive, and this message is getting out. So continue to do what you're doing. I mean, keep writing, keep speaking out.
Way in the back. Yes, sir, with the hat on. Oh, oh. Yeah.
As you can see, I'm one of those AQE people who's parading around Albany
Yep.
yesterday, and have been working with AQE in the Utica area
Yep.
since November. AQE does support the elimination of GEA, and there are school districts such as when we talked with Senator Seward on Friday in his office in Herkimer, foundation aid is going to help the Herkimer school district much more than the elimination of GEA. So I think it's very important for everyone to understand that the foundation aid formula has had an artificial floor put in it so that poor schools are not receiving their full amount of aid. So a school district whose combined aid ratio is 0.3, the floor is 0.65. So the formula is plugging in 0.65 when the formula should be plugging in 0.3. And if that's not changed, then our poor schools are not getting the money. So I know it's up to you guys to figure out where you're going to put that money, but there is a need for schools in Schoharie County, as well as the 9 counties that Senator Seward represents, to have massive amounts of foundation aid. Now, AQE and NYSA is asking for a commitment that over 4 years, we will be where we're supposed to be and have been refunded the money that we have lost.
So if I may, I had a conversation, I don't remember the gentleman's name, he's one of the principal spokesmen for AQE, and I was, to be honest, I was offended at the conversation. And I support AQE. He was happy to perpetuate continuation of the gap elimination, as I spoke to him, for the reason you suggested about the issue of dollars he feels are more effective for small and rural schools, poor schools, that is, and I get that. But my premise is gap elimination, foundation aid should be the balancing mechanism. Gap elimination reaches in afterwards and says, give me that. So we give foundation aid to all schools, and then the gap elimination comes and says, give me that back. The gap elimination was for a deficit. The deficit's gone. So to perpetuate gap elimination is basically intrinsically unfair. And that's my premise. So we get rid of gap elimination and fully fund our schools. That's where we should be. So I agree with you on that. And we do support our small and struggling schools, because there are schools that don't have AP classes, schools that don't have distance learning. So my concern with Alliance for Quality Education is we need to be on message, because they've never had that discussion with me. I learned it on my way back from Chamber, bumping into this guy on the second floor of the Capitol. He's never given me that message directly as a legislator. So I welcome that. So get rid of gap elimination, fully fund schools according to the formula, and we all do well. That's my belief. And your group is a great group. I support it. Yeah.
I'm a retired teacher.
Yeah.
I'm not an employee of the Alliance for Quality Education. I've been working, my school district worked with the Alliance for Quality Education to take students to Albany so that they have a field trip.
Yeah, and they've been excellent.
Because our school district does not have any money.
Yeah.
for school districts.
So I'm not maligning the group. I'm just saying the message is off compared to some of the other messages we're getting. We need to have the same message. Get rid of gap elimination and fully fund foundation aid. And honor the commitment for the CFE, the Campaign for Fiscal Equity. Honor that commitment as well. So thank you. No, I appreciate that.
And Senator Seward, at 8:30 last night, you sent out an email that I received from you that said that the governor's education reforms are also being significantly modified. And as you probably know, I'm on your list of people to call back. Bernadette left me a message that I'm on the list, so maybe you don't have to call me back. I've been talking to a lot last night at the forum in Fulton-Fontville, and also to several senators' staffs today about what that exactly means. What has been modified, what has been eliminated, what is still in there, because the Assembly took out everything. It's not in the Assembly resolution at all. And I'd really like to know what is in there, because it's, while senators are saying they oppose those, by having it in the resolution, it's saying, well, it's all right to negotiate this with the governor.
Well, the resolution is not specific. It does, the language is that we're going to go for modifications in most cases, and also outright rejection in others. Now, admittedly, this is a work in progress. But I've shared some of my thoughts in terms of the, what's some specific changes to the governor's proposal that I would like to make. So this is going to be, I mean, as a practical matter, this is going to be a negotiated process. I mean, otherwise we'll be here. You won't know what your state aid is. You'll be into the new school year before you'll know what your state aid is next year. I mean, we're looking to try to get an on-time budget, but we have uncoupled the governor's reform package from the state aid package. We're hoping to convince the governor that if we cannot come to terms, or if he doesn't, believe me, he's going to have to back off considerably in order to get anything through the legislature that we can agree on. Ultimately, we need the governor's signature on a ballot, or on a budget, and he's going to have to back off considerably in order, for us to come to terms here. But if we get into later in March without any agreement on any kind of reform package, then it's our hope that we can say, let's move forward with the state aid package, and let's put off this reform discussion for another day, post budget, or ideally, let's take considerable time to talk about. There are some changes that are needed. I mean, to say that. Pardon me?
Could you specify what changes you feel are needed?
Well, are you happy with the APPR system as it stands today?
It was the governor's. The governor was the one who said
Yeah.
that.
Well, he negotiated with NYSET, and NYSET begged us to pass the APPR.
We could stay with it the way it is right now.
What's that?
We could stay with it the way it is right now. It doesn't need to be 50% or 40%.
Yeah. Well, there are some changes that could be made. Certainly not what the governor's suggesting, with greater reliance on a test and that type of thing. But so what we are looking to do is let's take the time to bring stakeholders together and get it right. That's all I'm suggesting.
I was interested in your response to the question, how can we help? And as someone who has done a little bit of lobbying in Albany, I wonder if you might clarify the direction that people should reach out. Should, for example, the folks in this audience say, our local legislators are on board. We don't have to call your office continually to tell you, please support this. What we might need to do is call the governor's office, better still send him handwritten or computer printed letters, not copies, or choose a day and fax letters to the governor's office en masse, so that he gets the word that people out here do not like his proposals. And trying to reach out to senators and assemblymen from downstate may or may not work, because they want to hear from their constituents primarily. And the other way to reach out might be to go to our friends and neighbors and say, look, this is a bad situation. Here's what you can do. We already know that Pete and Jim are on our side. Let's go to the governor's office and let him have the brunt of our angst.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent suggestion, because obviously, we don't need to convince here, but we, as I said earlier, that we need help in getting the governor to back off, and so we can get a timely budget and come to terms with this. And so, direct your fire there. That's an excellent suggestion.
So I would say, and again, in terms of the governor's office, just so you know, in the governor's 30-day amendments, and they're not actually 30-day, but they call it his ability to amend the executive budget, he has put qualifiers in the budget that make it harder to resist his proposals. TAP, I think he would shut down TAP if he didn't get some of these reforms. And so, in my opinion, he has prepared himself for a long, drawn-out battle. he needs to feel the heat to take his will to fight away. So calling, all the things that were just described, absolutely you need to do and push the governor so he feels the heat, because he feels he's insulated right now. He's coming off an election. He had big numbers in his mind. He's feeling a little heady, and he needs to realize that no one person runs the state of New York. It's all of us together. It's not just one person. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you again, everybody, for coming out and sitting through this program. There are some postcards at your seat. If you haven't filled them out, you might want to take a minute, jot down a few questions or concerns that you still have, put them in any of the red boxes that you see on your way out the door, and we will